Welcome to the ThinkData Podcast, and today I am joined by Thais Branco. She is the head of strategy and marketing for a super interesting business called 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐸. They are an AI-first search engine, and they're really reshaping how humans and agents explore the web. It's obviously one of the hottest areas on the internet at the moment with the kind of blowing up of ChatGPT. But what we're going to do, we're going to really dig into kind of what sets 𝐬𝐿 apart, the bold strategies, and believe me, there's some pretty bold ones here behind its rapid growth, and Thais's real take on where AI agents are really moving the needle. So thanks for coming on. I know we finally made it happen. So I'm glad you've come on this morning. And as I mentioned, obviously very high level, but for you as obviously head of strategy and marketing, how would you describe 𝐬𝐿 to the non-technical folk listening? And ultimately, for the more technically au fait, how do you position it differently from the likes of Bing and Perplexity?
Totally. So I think Google was really the first search engine over the web and was optimized and created for consumers. So for people like you and me to type a few keywords in search. And now we're getting to this world in which AI agents like ChatGPT are searching the web on our behalf. So you need a different type of search engine that's optimized for AIs being the ones searching and consuming that information. And that's basically what 𝐬𝐿 is. So we created a better, faster search engine, but that's also optimized for this type of use case. So our main job is not to be a consumer-facing, platform like ChatGPT, but it's to power apps and other businesses. So we're very B2B focused and want to be this infrastructure for the AI ecosystem.
Interesting. So with who would your typical customers be in that case? And because obviously you've got obviously Perplexity, they're obviously kind of an AI native startup. You've obviously got the more established search engine in Bing. So who are you typically targeting? Because obviously you are the one leading this kind of go-to-market, and I'm going to touch on some of the really interesting go-to-market bits. But yeah, who are your customer base?
So our customers range from large tech companies to startups that are building AI first products. So think like from Notion to Cursor to search engines, actually, sometimes are our customers as well. Fortune 500 companies building internal solutions with AI. So it really has a very wide range, but typically the use cases that we see are any type of app that has a consumer-facing or customer-facing AI feature, and 𝐬𝐿 kind of becomes the search that grounds that AI and makes sure it has all the factual information and isn't hallucinating and connecting it to the web. Or also for internal solutions. So we have a lot of like banks, hedge funds, consulting firms that are building solutions for either like market research or selling sometimes or recruiting. So there might be actually some relevant stuff for us to chat on the recruiting front.
Nice.
But where 𝐬𝐿 is so good at understanding like nuanced things that are semantic heavy, as we call it. So finding things like people and companies with like hyper specific descriptors. So we started seeing a lot of these more like internal use cases that require a lot of data intelligence pop up as well.
It's a really interesting area, isn't it? Because if you think of some of these large organizations, one of the big issue they have is all the disparate data sources, and they've got all this knowledge base there. But actually, to navigate, I think about kind of legal is a good example where actually just trying to access that data. So you're seeing as much internal demand for this as the kind of the more normal, external search partners then.
Totally. And an example of a legal company, actually. So one of our customers is called White House. So they're a legal tech firm, and they basically scour the web for signals of potential like class action lawsuits, or maybe something that someone said on Reddit or a random blog that might indicate that this could turn into a class action lawsuit, or that's part of already something that they're working on. So it can help on such interesting things like this, like very nuanced kind of scattered monitoring of the web, but also finding very valuable references, like, find cases of laws that are related to this very specific type of instance. So it's super cool. And I think we've also been constantly surprised by things our customers have done. It's actually even expanded our own understanding of where search can be applied. So yeah, it's been super cool to see.
Yeah, it must be. And I know you touched on it before we went live, but obviously you joined employee 10. That business has now grown to the point that you obviously had to find new offices. Talk to me about that journey, because obviously coming in, where were 𝐬𝐿 in terms of marketing and outreach at the point you joined, and kind of where are they now?
It feels like a completely different company. I think there's a few things that were very, very funny about this journey. So I think first of all, I I joined as one of the very first business hires. We were mainly an engineering team before this. We barely had enterprise customers, and kind of no one knew really what we were. I remember going to some events in SF and explaining 𝐸𝐶 and watching people's kind of confused face trying to figure out what we were when I was saying like, oh, we're a search engine for AI agents. Because no one was talking about AI agents a year and a half ago, right? So it changed completely. And so no one knew what, like, had not heard of the company, but also didn't really understand this whole segment that we plan to operate in. So it's been an insane year, basically growing the team to now like basically 40 people, moving offices, but also just like becoming a super known brand. So we went from, a conversation at a dinner party that no one knew what we were to now people being so excited to talk about it and get our takes on things. We've done billboards, we've done a bunch of like awesome campaigns, and I think we're just at a completely different level of awareness, but also the market changed a lot, which is super cool to see. So like in a year, now like AI agents have completely taken over, and we're talking about such different applications within AI agents, from like, sales agents to like customer support, vertical things. So it's super cool. And I think we're very well positioned to kind of rise with this ecosystem. But yeah, definitely feels better to now explain it at a dinner party and people being like, oh, I totally get it.
Yeah. I'm guessing, as I say, if you think about it, a year and a half ago, the education piece was probably far harder than it is now, where I'm not saying that your success is down to the rise of popularity of AI agents, because I know obviously you've got some very unique go-to-market tactics as well.
Yeah.
But I think the education piece has become a little bit easier because more people are kind of going, oh, I get it. And everyone's talking about agentic AI tied in with generative AI. So everyone's really understanding the benefits it brings. But I'm really keen to touch on, obviously you grew signups eightfold in 5 months. And I love talking about go-to-market and kind of defining product market fit. But as someone who's responsible for that, talk to me about some of the tactics that drove that adoption, because obviously you are in that B2B space, and trying to break in is the education piece is one thing, but actually just trying to get the ear of someone is a whole different challenge. So talk to me about that.
Totally. So I think one of the interesting things is we've always had a mindset of how do we generate inbound. So we haven't really been focusing on like scaling outbound. Recently, now we started setting this up, but in terms of the DNA of the company, it's way more how do we create interest and create this education in very organic ways. So we, for example, always really invested in the developer experience and the developer community, and had this very PLG growth type product and have made efforts like viral tweets and making like the best technical documentation and launching an MCP very quickly as soon as that became a thing. So we've always paid a lot of attention to that developer ecosystem. And I think that honestly has brought us a very loyal community that also very naturally talks about us. And then the other movement that we had to do is how do we move up market, right? So how do we actually talk to enterprises and nail these like giant contracts with companies that are super big or growing really, really fast. And that requires a parallel effort that's slightly different on how do you call this like disproportionate amount of attention, but also convey trust and convey education. So from things all the way from like, billboards that I think are a great tactic to actually convey this like oversized trust and awareness, but also things like really great case studies with customers and how do we like highlight all these different types of companies that are using us, so that when an enterprise that maybe it's their first time or second time hearing about us and they come onto our site, they're like, oh wait, like this is legit, like there's awesome companies using this. So you have to kind of pair these more top of funnel awareness, more like viral type tactics with health of the community, and then add a bunch of the robustness that I think enterprises really need to trust something like this.
Yeah, it's probably it's quite a challenging, split of your, focus, isn't it? Because on one hand, the enterprise ones are ultimately going to bring in the bigger ARRs, the bigger revenue, but equally building that community. Without that community, then you've got no referenceable case study or case points or feedback loops to take to those enterprises. So how do you balance that? Is it just down to just being really diligent with your time, or are you just a bit more opportunistic and a bit more entrepreneurial about what you're going to focus on each week?
I think we've always tried to pair both, at least since I joined. I think before I joined, we were more primarily focused on the PLG, but we've tried to pair both, and I think it over time also became very clear that it was worth it, in the sense of they were very symbiotic. Like we saw oftentimes things landing on enterprises through a very organic PLG way. So like maybe like a random developer tried it and loved it and then told someone else, and then suddenly the VP of engineering was reaching out to us. So they are very symbiotic in nature, actually.
Mm.
And I saw this even with so we raised a Series B last week, which was super exciting. We
Oh,
announced it finally to
exciting.
the
Great
world.
news.
Yeah, it was incredible. But what was really funny is if you go on Twitter and you check like the comments that people made about our raise, usually when companies that developers don't like raise, the comments are brutal on Twitter. And it's people like completely roasting the company. And I was so happy to see how like Twitter really backed us and was so
Oh,
excited
nice.
raising this round. It was amazing. And so I think it shows that we're actually building a really good product and a really good developer experience. Like there's nothing that makes me happier than when people say our docs are amazing. And that I think ends up leading to actually a lot of benefits with enterprise that sometimes are invisible, but definitely are present.
Yeah, it's really no one's really mentioned that how that feedback loop you can't control, can you? When you see something on Twitter or Reddit blowing up, you just can't. You've just got to watch it either, blow up in your face or actually benefit you. And it's great to hear on the Series B, but you begin to see that. I'm really interested. I'm looking forward to asking this question around the Bloom Box campaign, because obviously before I think you're responsible for we set up the scene for this, but what was the idea? And obviously with our kind of scope and call before this podcast, it was something fascinating which I've never heard about, especially in this kind of digital AI world. But talk to me about that. What was it?
So I'm a big believer, by the way, in doing things that don't scale and in doing things that can call a disproportionate amount of attention. I think if you try to do boring marketing in today's world, like it's not gonna work. So we try to always be very creative, and we had a few like amazing customers that are based in San Francisco, and also other companies that aren't our customers yet, and that we really want them to be our customers.
Mm.
We were cracking our heads on like, okay, how do we call the attention of these folks, and how do we like invite them to an event so that we can like, get to know them better and chat in a more informal setting. And we had this brilliant idea of like, okay, why don't we send these gigantic boxes to their office as the invite to the event? So basically we ordered these boxes, filled them with a bunch of balloons and like one tiny ball inside of the box that said, this was hard to find, web data shouldn't be, and had a QR code that was the invite. But when the boxes arrived, by the way, like I need to set the scene here. They were like absurdly large. They were so much larger than I even thought they would be. So it took a monstrous effort to set this up. We were lucky that we were about to change offices, so this current office now was empty. So I spent basically an entire weekend with like 8 task rabbits, like setting up these boxes and filling like thousands and thousands of balloons.
Wow.
And then got like 2 trucks to basically drive around SF and deliver these boxes. And in half the offices, they like wouldn't fit through the elevator or like through the stairs. We had like whole teams coming down to the street to open this. So it definitely fulfilled the requirement of calling attention. I don't know if we're going to be repeating it anytime soon because it was kind of crazy to set up, but it was super cool. And I think it ended up really, really like breaking through the noise, but also we almost developed a bonding experience with people that we delivered this to, like laughing together on like how to get this box into their offices. So it was great. And in terms of like ROI, by the way, which a lot of people ask me, I think one, we did actually generate a ton of pipeline from this. So a bunch of customers that were either kind of ghosting us or that we really wanted and we hadn't necessarily been able to get in touch, we actually now have contracts with, and that already not only is pipeline, but actually turned into revenue. But a second and more nuanced thing is we generated content off of this thing and posted it all over like Twitter and LinkedIn, and it went viral on those platforms as well. So we actually ended up getting a lot of subsequent leads and subsequent conversations where people mentioned this. So the benefit of these things ends up being very nuanced, but it trickles. Like you can't fully measure it. You just have to, try to max that virality, and then just you see the benefit come through.
Yeah, I've been in staffing in tech for 20 years. I've never heard of that kind of initiative, and I think it's that kind of self-perpetuating momentum. People start talking, oh, you're the balloon guys, and I think it's just that kind of. It's good. I think it's interesting you touched on that, because marketing for me is in this kind of AI world, it's almost become a bit more boring and dull, and it's just volume. But actually the creatives behind great marketing campaigns years ago were coming up with some really interesting concepts. For you, were you just very specific about saying we're going to do something different, or did this naturally just end up becoming different?
No, I think we're very intentional actually with doing things that are different. And I'll give you some other examples of things we've done. So for example, on the hiring front, talent, I think, is the single most important thing in succeeding as a startup. You need to attract great people. And, I spent a bunch of last year actually going to conferences, like AI conferences, to try to recruit like PhDs and researchers. So one of the things that we did at NeurIPS, which is a pretty big AI conference, was actually we created an app purposely for it to go viral within the conference. So we basically got all of the research papers that were being presented in the conference, and it transformed them into this really cool visual app where you could see the papers and search over them in neural ways, which is kind of the benefit of 𝐸XA, but it added value, right? It was something that was actually helpful to people. And it was great because then as people came to our booth, they were like, oh, I actually was using your guys' app yesterday, and it became this super organic thing. Or, for example, we spread these posters, these like mysterious posters with puzzles through the marina that basically were meant to have people get like curious about what they were and try to crack the puzzle. And the answer to the puzzle was basically a link to apply to a specific role that we had that was kind of meant for very brainy people. So I think we try to take this logic to everything that we do and always try to be unique while at the same time connecting back. I think I'm not a fan of marketing that is just viral for the sake of being viral.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think marketing that just tries to be viral without an actual solid message that helps your brand, I don't think is healthy in the long term. I see a few startups in SF doing this, and I would say it's not my style, but I love this idea of like, how do you cut through the noise but tie it back in a really like intelligent way?
Yeah, and I probably know one of the ones you're alluding to because we follow obviously on LinkedIn and through our own kind of SF kind of network. There's been one company in particular that's kind of talked about kind of replacing sales with AI, and there's been huge billboards, huge banners everywhere, and it's created huge attention. But I think on your point earlier, if you're trying to break upstream into those kind of enterprise, do those enterprise customers think, oh, you guys are here for the right reasons? I love that, and I think it's really interesting. I'm looking forward to checking out the balloon kind of thing on your website and your LinkedIn page after this. But I'm keen to touch on AI in the workplace. So a lot of with agentic AI, we're seeing some efficiencies being created. There's obviously a lot to talk about displacement, but I think on the flip side, we're seeing companies just becoming more efficient with less people, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But internally, 𝐸XA talked about that kind of AI setup from kind of marketing, content, go to market. How does that work?
We have like initiatives constantly on how do we use AI more internally. So like the engineering team is actually super focused on this, on how do we become more efficient on the, let's say, deploying code side. On the go-to-market side, I think we try to use it in a few different ways. So one, in research. So like as we're especially now doing more outbound and more like targeting specific verticals that we know have awesome use cases for 𝐸XA, how do we use, and we have our own tool actually that we use for this called WebSets, to basically do really deep research and map like what is every single company that would fit this criteria of this category, and then do a bunch of research understanding like recent news about them, product launches, who are the people we need to be reaching out to at these companies, crafting like custom messaging to them. So that whole flow from almost like market mapping to researching those potential customers super deeply. That's definitely one area. And then on the content front, I'd say we use it for brainstorming quite a bit of ideas. I think in terms of copywriting, we're actually still very not anti using AI in copywriting, but like it's not there yet, I would say, in terms of quality. And you can definitely tell it's AI generated when it is. So we've actually moved away from any type of AI generated copy. And our founder is like super adamant about this. He wants like zero AI generated copy on any of our assets. So we're then pretty, I would say, traditional still on crafting everything and thinking through every word in a very careful way. But yeah, we try to use it more as an enablement tool to help automate a lot of manual processes, and especially that research and intelligence side.
It's really interesting to say about the content piece, because it's almost like we've gone in such a short period of time. If you think 2.5 years since, obviously, or nearly 3 years when ChatGPT came out, companies that actually go back to the way content used to be written with someone's brain, and they're almost standing out now for different reasons, because actually before it was like those companies have got loads more content pushed out and it's all AI driven and all AI written. But now those are uniquely written by a human. They're standing out. So you begin to see that yourself as well?
Totally. And by the way, I think AI generated content is helpful. So for certain things like SEO, then it's helpful because we need to generate just like a gigantic volume of blogs with very specific keywords, and makes sense. But for something that is meant to represent your brand and represent your point of view and you as a thought leader, AI is just not at the capacity that a human is right now of having that creativity and that nuance and that taste in writing
Mm,
to deliver the same outcome. So I think if you try to just automate it, to your point, like maybe you'll be saving time, but you won't actually be having better outcomes necessarily.
no.
And it becomes very like stale, like and robotic. Like it doesn't actually have that much of a strong point of view. So
Mm.
yeah, I think brands that are able to transform the people within their companies into almost like thought leaders and content creators in the like purest sense of that word, definitely are standing out.
Yeah, really interesting. And in terms of your work, obviously, I know you're targeting specific verticals, but obviously, you've done a lot of analysis across kind of agentic AI and this. Myself as a recruiter, that area is really kind of blown up, and obviously, X are front and center of that space right now. But as a head of marketing and obviously head of strategy, what are some of the trends and use cases you're beginning to see across agentic AI or companies specifically built as AI agent companies?
I'm seeing two things that have been really interesting. So I think one is this verticalization. I think there's a lot of very interesting vertical AI agents showing up. And I think
Mm,
it's a perfect use case for them because you can go very deep when you're creating a vertical solution. So there's a company, for example, called the Happy Robot. I think they just fundraised as well recently. And they're building these vertical voice agents for trucking companies, I believe. And they can then really, really, really optimize all of their feature, but also all of their backend flows for that exact use case. So that I think has been a movement. We started on very like horizontal type of agents, and now I've seen a lot more of these very vertical ones popping up. And then the second thing is, I think we've also seen a movement first away from UI, meaning having AI agents that almost don't have a front end, if that makes sense. So like sales agent that maybe operates kind of like invisibly and independently from you. And now I think we're seeing a movement back to actually really crafting UI of these products and
mm.
design and still giving people within companies that are, buying these agents, let's say, a lot of control and visibility. And before it was a bit more of this like black box experience of just trust that this AI is like doing its thing. And
Yeah.
I think we've seen that people do want a bit of that control and UI still. So I'm very curious on how that will evolve in like the design of these products.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. I think what you saw as post ChatGPT was a lot of these kind of wrappers around ChatGPT where it was deemed agentic AI, but actually what it was literally a wrapper. But I think the companies now have to be very deep in their vertical, have to know the use case, have to know the space, have to have found a team that understands it, because let's be honest, it could be the only differentiator, because it's a lot easier to launch these businesses now than 2-3 years ago. Obviously, they were just unheard of. And what's next for 𝐿𝐸? Obviously, really exciting period for you. New offices, loads of growth, hiring, crazy kind of go to market and campaigns, which I love. But yeah, what's next for you over the next 6-12 months, or at least what you can tell us?
I'm super excited. I've actually never been more bullish and more excited about the company. I think the Series B also like cements that quite a bit in the sense that now we'll have full resources to run at this problem. And I think the two major things on our mind are one, hiring. And I think also we plan to basically double our team in a relatively short amount of time across the board, honestly, from like engineering to go to market and all of that. And I think the second is it's interesting, but I think oftentimes fundraising also becomes this external signal validator that unlocks opportunities that you didn't necessarily have before as a company, even if your product's exactly the same.
Yeah.
For example, some more like traditional enterprises now might be way more comfortable using us because they know that we're gonna, be around for a long time and are not going away anytime soon and are doing super well. So I'm excited to also, just unleash go to market and turn it into even more of a machine, both continuing this like strength that we have on the PLG community, but also being able to tackle enterprise even better.
Yeah, amazing. Well, look, thanks so much for coming on this morning. I think, Thais, the articulation, the kind of how passionate you are about this space is no surprise. X has had the had the, success that it has, obviously joined number 10. You got obviously 40 folks, Series B, looking to double. People listening here will make sure that you check X out. Really interesting product. Yeah, no, thanks so much, Thais. It's been my pleasure to have you on.
Of course. Thank you, Alex. It's been amazing. Thanks for
Thanks very
having me.
much. Have a good morning.